I was represented at William Morris at the time, and they also represented David Kirshner, and there was an open assignment on something that at the time was called Blood Buddy. And my agent set up a meeting with his assistant, I think at the time, Laura Moskowitz, and I met with her, and we had a great meeting, and then I met with David, and again we had a great meeting. I just really connected with him, and we were talking about the ideas for it, and they hired me. They hired me to do a rewrite on the project, which at the time had gone through some rewrites with Tom Holland, who had failed, and they had gotten rid of him, and this was kind of like the last go-around they were going to do. They hired me, and I went home and I started writing, and eventually I came up with a draft, and we turned it into the studio, and the next day they called and said the project is greenlit, and that's how I got involved with the first one. And because of my involvement with the first one and my working relationship with David, I went on and wrote and directed my own film, The Blue Iguana, for Paramount, and David saw that, and they hired me to get involved as a director for Child's Play 2. That's how I got involved with the franchise. The origin of the name Chucky is I had been talking to David, and he wanted to give the doll, which in the original draft did not have a backstory. He wanted to give it a backstory of being a serial killer. And I think David already had the name Charles in mind. I could be wrong. But I think he did, like as Charles Lee Ray, using, a variety of names that certain mass killers or serial killers really had in the U.S. in the past. I was writing it, and I realized that the boy, who I actually had called Martin, but became Andy, had to address his doll. And I just really could not work with the idea that he would call his doll Charles. It seemed really stupid. Charlie seemed really dated. And just literally, I was thinking about it. I don't know, maybe I was walking, and all of a sudden it popped into my head that Chuck is actually a nickname or a derivation of Charles, and suddenly the word Chucky popped into my head, and I just instantly, the second that popped into my head, I knew it was right. I thought, oh, this is so perfect. So I realized the doll only could have so many responses, particularly, again, you got to realize this is in the late 80s. The technology was very limited. So I figured I had to come up with 4 or 5 just key phrases that the doll would just say, but that could be interpreted in different ways depending on the circumstances. And so one of them was, "Hi, I'm Chucky, wanna play?" Another one was, "I'll be your friend to the end," which I thought I could do something with, and I did later on. I gave Andy the line, "This is the end, friend." There was another one, "I like to be hugged," which often can be used for irony if Chucky says that. So just things like that. There's a couple more lines that have become rather well known, but I just can't think of them all. I always felt that the script that I had done, the draft, was actually better than the one that Tom Holland eventually shot. I felt like he changed a lot of things in the story just to try to get a bigger credit. And there were a lot of scenes that I had written that were taken out of my draft. And when Child's Play 2 came around, there are 3 or 4 scenes that I had had in Child's Play 1, my draft, that basically made their way into Child's Play 2. So when my opportunity came to do Child's Play 2, and then it was also my decision with David to bring Don back into the franchise, because I'd become friends with him at the time, and I just really liked him, and I felt he had a lot to offer. I always felt we could do better than the first one. So maybe it was my youth, but I felt competition with the first one in a good way. Like I was going to do my take on this story that was not necessarily related to his. That's one of the reasons Catherine Hicks did not come back. It had nothing to do with her as an actress. It just was, I didn't want that character to come back. One of the things I felt, and it probably was right for Child's Play 1, was that that was really shot from an adult's point of view. It was more Catherine Hicks' point of view. And I really, really in number 2 was committed to the idea of shooting it from Andy's point of view and Chucky's. Because of that, I have a lot of people approach me who saw it as a child, and it seems to have really stuck in their brain, and that's probably why. I shot a lot of the film from very low angles, very wide lenses, which I remember being a kid, that's how the world looked to me. And a lot of bright colors. The whole factory scene in the end to me is something, it doesn't look like a real factory. It looks like Willy Wonka, which was something that I also felt was unique in a horror film. I thought, why does it have to be this dark and gloomy place? It can be just as terrifying if it's got amusement park color. The star of Child's Play 1 turned out to be Chucky. And I was very aware of that in Child's Play 2, that this is the star. And a lot of effort was put into the puppetry. A lot of effort. Another thing is the first one used a little person for a lot of the shots, and I was committed that I was not going to do that. Every single shot in Child's Play 2 is done with an actual puppet. We went over budget, and I got beat up for that, but I was really committed. The shot where Miss Kettlewell, where Chucky comes out of the closet and says, "You've been very naughty, Miss Kettlewell," that took an entire day to shoot, because at the time, we didn't have the technology to digitally erase cables and other things, and we had to build a closet, put clothes in. On the other side of that closet is a long boom hidden behind Chucky's back, and there's 10 guys on the other side of that wall wearing masks and gears and operating this thing, and they can't see it. And that puppet would often just screw up over and over and over again. So to get all the movements and the voice coordinated took an enormous amount of time. But again, I was just really committed that having a shot like that to really sell the dolls being real was just critical. I believe on the set of the first one, they had just someone reading the lines, and then Brad dubbed it after the fact, but that's problematic because to get the lips to sync correctly, I think it was problematic. So I think they figured out that the best way to do it would be to have Brad record the dialogue and play it back on set, and then the puppeteers would match that dialogue. So when you're shooting it, it's actually the words. The only tricky part was, of course, is that we had to really commit to Brad's dialogue. I mean, you could re-loop it, but to really take advantage of what he did, when he and I went into the studio for a couple of days before shooting the film, we had to really kind of say, okay, this is what it's going to be. It's a strange sensation. You would think it would be like, oh, wow, that's wonderful. And it is. But it's a strange sensation. I think at some point I just had to come to terms with the idea that this creation was going to outlive me. And that's a strange thing. I mean, I guess it's kind of what I always wanted when I was a kid. I mean, I loved making models, and I built all the Universal monster models like the werewolf and Dracula and Frankenstein, and to think that I could have had a hand in bringing to life a character that could live on as long as they could is kind of a dream come true. So it's wonderful, but again, it's strange. It's like seeing an old girlfriend around all the time. Someone you've had a very deep romance with at one point. You don't necessarily have one at the time. You're glad she's thriving, but it's also a little strange. Just how else could I say it? It's an unusual experience to go through as a human being. But, it's a lot better than having never made any kind of impact at all. So, but it's curious. Hi, I'm John Lafia, and I am the co-screenwriter of Child's Play 1, responsible for coming up with the name Chucky and lines of dialogue such as "Wanna play," "I'll be your friend to the end," "This is the end, friend," that sort of thing. And I was involved as the director for Child's Play 2, which was one of my favorite directing assignments. I really loved doing it. It was a lot of fun. I loved working with Don Mancini and David Kirshner. And I'm thrilled to see how long the franchise has lived and how ingrained the character of Chucky has become with the general public. And I'm excited about this new release that's being brought to you in Germany, and I hope you really enjoy the film. I'm going to be doing a commentary throughout, and maybe you'll learn a few things you didn't know. Have fun.